Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another installment of the Third Podcast, where we discuss this, that, and the third. And on today's episode, we are going to talk about the impact of Kevin Samuels. It is unfortunate that we have lost Kevin Samuels, to many people known as the Godfather here in the manosphere space. Many people have called him controversial due to his approach, the things that he said about women and about men, and his viewpoints on relationships. And on today's podcast, we're going to share our perspective as three individuals who have digested Kevin's content, connected with him on various different levels, and also have our own perspectives on relationships, as all three of us are in what we would consider healthy Black relationships ourselves. So we're going to add some perspective on today's podcast. We encourage you all to join the conversation in the chat. Let us know what you think about Kevin, about what his impact was and the legacy he's left. And where do we go from here? So with that, I'm going to bring in Kai first. Kai, how are you doing? What's going on?
I'm good. How are you doing, Brandon?
I'm maintaining as best as possible. You know, we lost a soldier in this fight to improve ourselves. You know, he was someone who rattled a lot of trees and made a lot of people uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, I think that the content was constructive. It was consistent. And it was something that we definitely needed to really wake a lot of folks up to understand what was going on, but it also has some blowback. So, you know, I'm still processing. Unlike a lot of other people, I didn't see Kevin Samuels as like a pseudo father or uncle or anything like that, but I did think of him as an influencer for sure.
Agreed. He definitely came with a perspective that was, I don't even know if I want to say fresh. I think it was a lot of conversations that a lot of Black men were having, maybe just not on a space where everybody was really listening to and paying attention to. But I'm sure in the homes, Black men have been saying having similar type of conversations with people in the home, with friends, with family. But this time it was just more on a bigger platform. And I know a lot of people complained about Kevin's delivery, but at the end of the day, you just have to listen to the message and what was he saying? Not if you agree with everything, but was there some pieces of his message that were true and that required you to make some changes in your life? So I look forward to having the conversation tonight.
Absolutely. And next, we're going to bring in our third co-host, Aaron. Hey, Ron, what's up, man? How are you?
Hola, how's everybody doing this evening?
Good.
Yeah, Kev, well, I know we're going to get into it, but I started with Kevin's content before the infamous video. And it was about 5 years prior to, and I was a mediocre Black male, and I was listening to as much content as I could digest about self-improvement, working, corporate America, and he popped up on that algorithm. And we're going to get into some of the clips and stuff like that. But, you know, I just find it very interesting that all of a sudden, if you don't agree with somebody, it's almost like that person should have never existed. And I think that's pretty problematic. And we need to kind of look at that as a quote unquote, as Mr. Fuller says, culture, but also as individuals, because none of us are too far from death. And sometimes I think we forget that.
Absolutely. Well, where should we start? You know, I think most people came across Kevin Samuels when the Average at Best clip went viral. That's when most people knew about him. If you've paid attention to any podcast or show that I've been on, especially with Aaron, we probably brought up Kevin Samuels damn near every episode.
Yeah, just about.
In one way or another. And it was never really like super hyping him up, like, oh, Kevin knows everything. It was really us just peeping like his progression, you know, his business acumen, the way that he utilized social media, the talking points that he utilized. It was all genius, and it worked, and it put him into mainstream, at least social media mainstream, and he was slowly ascending into like the mainstream, just offline world as well. And I thought that was important. But even more important is he was addressing the issue that every Black platform online finds a way to talk about, which is relationships. And he did it from a way that was unapologetic. He did it from a way that had standards and accountability. And he did it in a way that made people uncomfortable. And I think that's just something we don't see. We see a lot of conversations about Black relationships that blame one side or the other, never really comes to a conclusion on anything. there's never any statistics that really get utilized. And if there are, there's some old ass statistics.
Right.
What typically ends up happening. And then it just becomes a circular argument. And Kevin just kind of cut through the circular argument and just kept it real. So where do you all think we should start? Well, let me start with this question. Let me back up. What impact did Kevin make on you personally? You know, as someone who's digested his content, what impact did he make on you?
I guess I kind of started off a little bit earlier, but I just think that professionally, and we can actually, if you want to cue up that clip, I think it'd be a really good leeway into it. But just professionally, being in corporate America, typically being the only Black guy in corporate spaces consistently, like I typically walk into a room and there's nobody else that looks like me ever. And him saying that Black men belong and that you can compete, it's one thing to hear it from a pastor because it sounds very nice. It's another thing to hear it from somebody that's actually in those spaces that is unapologetically talking about it. And it hit like your brother that's just trying to, not a father, Brandon, not a father, but like your homie that's like, hey, come on, man, we got to get this together. Like, what we doing out here? And so I think this clip can kind of, for a lot of men too, because the other thing I do want to point out is, I don't know, Brandon, you guys are more technologically advanced than I am. There's like millions of comments on his videos. Are those bots or are those fake? Those are real people, I'm assuming, correct?
For the most part, real people, yeah.
Okay, because a lot of those people, men and women, white, Black, Indian, Asian, there were a lot of guys and women years that like Kevin. Because I always look at the dates of the comment. Women saying, hey, I appreciate it. You helped my husband. Guys, hey, I'm a white guy. And you know what, Kevin? Some of this rhetoric you're talking about when it came to Black women, quote unquote, I'm dealing with this in women from my mom, from my aunt, to my sister. And so I kind of think that if people didn't do the research, he kind of got a little bit misunderstood. But for me, myself, this clip kind of can tell you everything you need to know about Kevin.
I reject that wholeheartedly. Black men have always achieved. Whether we got the credit for it or not, we have. I reject the fact that there's only one way to be a real man. You got to be on the, no. It ain't always about the street. Life is war. You need to be a warrior scholar. So where are you going tonight? What are you doing? Are you just sitting at home? Are you sitting at home while you letting every other man out here run wild and take everything? Where are you? Look, man, ain't nobody rushing to get into the club to serve shit in red cups. The little hood joint, the little juke joint, the only people there is us. Go over there and go take what is yours. Bring who you want, take what's yours. And then what you do with it's your business. I don't care if you run over to the suburbs, play golf, go to the cocktail parties, go to the cigar lounge, go to the American Heart Association events, do all this upper echelon stuff and take it right back to the hood. Knock yourself out. I don't dick watch or pocket watch. I want you to get it. Guess what? Black women want you to get it too. I was talking to, I'm not going to say the person's name, but I was reminding them of a video.
You can stop it right there. For some reason, when I heard that, when I first watched the video, and he said, Black women want you to get it too. I don't know, Brandon, but it struck me because it's like, they want us to be successful as well. And the whole aspect that we couldn't play the whole video, but the whole thing was talking about the level of, he didn't even use the word lazy. It's the level of associated mediocrity with us almost in the victimization stage of us watching the world go by and us not going out there and competing. And what I will say about Kevin, you don't even have to like the message, but in his real life as an older guy, he whooped all these young people's ass in YouTube. When it came to the game, when it came to monetization, I mean, I know you guys have heard, when I start talking about like the numbers that this guy was generating and how specifically strategic he was on how he did stuff, he learned the algorithms. Erica Williams, shout out to the Classic Climb, she said Kevin went and took a meeting at YouTube to talk about why certain Black influencers' numbers are not the same as other white influencers' numbers. This was a guy that was Tasha K talked about it. This was a guy that was fighting for Black YouTube in general. Nobody ever talks about the video where he talks about Birth of a Nation. Nobody ever talks about the video to where he talks about the death of the Black church. And nobody ever talks about the video when he talks about when he had cancer. This guy just died, and nobody talked about the fact that he was a cancer survivor. Nobody. But I heard, well, let me not say that, but I heard a lot of people talking about why he should be dead. And that's just very problematic for a guy that was just trying to leave his impact and really opened up the lane for men and women on YouTube to start having a lot of these conversations. He birthed a lot of these channels, Brandon. A lot of them.
Absolutely. How about for you, Kai? What impact did Kevin have on you?
Yeah, I mean, I think listening to his content, it caused me to think about my actions as a wife, as a Black woman, in this space of hearing a lot of negative comments, videos, memes, whatever about Black men, and kind of what role will I play in that space? Will I go along with whatever narratives because that's what kind of will push your videos or push you your profile further? Or will I take a stance of no, defending members of my community? And also it caused me to think about the role that I play in my marriage, and how marriage is not just about lovey-dovey, but it's about a responsibility. It's not all about your feelings. It's about a duty that you have for the person that you decided to spend the rest of your life with. And it's about waking up early to prepare a meal. And maybe it's about going to bed late at night to make sure that the house is clear. I mean, it's for mature people is what I'm trying to say for marriage. And I think that our community is wrapped up in a lot of feelings and emotionalism. And so when you have someone that's coming to challenge you and causing you to step out of your emotions, that can leave you feeling very uncomfortable. But I think that now more than ever, we need to do that, especially with the past episodes that we've talked about, the different issues that are going to be impacting this country. We cannot operate in our emotions at all. And so I think Kevin really challenged us, especially Black women, and we are not used to anybody challenging us, right? We're used to, what did he say? The shame, insults, the need to be right. Like, just kind of say that to shut whoever up. And so he's like, no, you're not going to shut me up. You're not going to shut Black men up. You're going to listen to what we have to say. And of course, that's going to affect the emotions of a lot of Black women and some Black men.
Wow. Thank you both for sharing. I think I'm gonna get a little personal for me to talk about my impact. So Kevin really wasn't the person who made the impact. I would say kind of the school of thought or the training ground is the impact where Kevin was really birthed out of is what made the impact out of me. So even when I hear like sign language was built off a concept that came from BGS Idmore. And BGS used to say, Black women will always use shame, guilt, and the need to be right. And Kevin added insults, which was a smart move. And he made that acronym in the sign language, which was brilliance in his part to utilize it as a concept. But there's other stuff too, but that concept comes out of a portion of the Black manosphere called Idmore, which at the time, the leading figure was BGS Idmore. And there used to be a bunch of us who would get online, have these dialogues and conversations. We used to be on Google Hangouts for hours all the time, just discussing history, discussing politics, relationships, and all this stuff. And Kevin was one of those people that got brought into this space from BGS. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people won't give BGS credit on that either. But BGS seen, like, he's seen that there was a group of people at the time we were calling educated lames who needed a person like Kevin, who was a style expert, to help them get some physical style and help them with their game. So we were getting game through a lot of the conversations, but these dudes will still just have like no presentation. Like, they still look frumpy. So Kevin was a guy who was like, okay, he had the videos. He was helping people get their smells together. I'll never forget, I was on a hangout with Kevin once, and this dude was like, hey, Kevin, let me ask you a question. And so the dude, Kevin asked him like 3 questions, like, how tall are you? How tall are you? How much you weigh? You know, what's your skin tone? Whatever, right? And this dude's talking, he's telling Kevin this stuff. And Kevin's like, you need to do this, this, and this, go buy this, go buy that. Kevin went on for like 20 minutes, right? And then this dude was just like at a standstill. He didn't know what else to say. He was just like, damn, thank you, Kevin. And then I hopped right in and I said, hey, Kevin, what's your P.O. box? Because he owes you a check. Like, we just sat here for 25 minutes and you just styled this man online and helped him get right. And you could see how his confidence got boosted just in that space. And this was like 4 or 5 years ago when this happened. This is like 2019, I think, when this happened. So, you know, he had a gift, but I think, you know, the way that his gift was shared was he was going up against the matriarchy. He was going up against Black women, which is a hard thing to do in this community, which is why a lot of Black men be quiet. They don't say anything. And they end up suffering in silence, or they have this red pill rage, as we call it, because they never get an opportunity to talk, and then they lose their damn minds. And this is not something that's just something that we see in the Black community. We see this in a lot of communities. I mean, you can look at the Buffalo supermarket shooter that just happened. If you read I spent a good chunk of my day listening and looking at his manifesto. He's talking about reproduction, stuff that I've talked about with both of you, and I've been telling y'all for the longest of time. There are a segment of folks who are really concerned about the birth rates of white folks, and these people, they're not using any logic, but they are upset, and they're young, and they're frustrated, and they're incels, and this is what ends up happening. And unfortunately, we will have more incidents. We have some Black versions of this too over the past year, like the brother who killed his baby's mom and his girlfriend when he had his kids in the car in Baltimore. I think that was in Maryland, actually. Like, we've seen this happen. Well, these men who they've had so much just like hopelessness and losses when it comes to women that they lose a piece of themselves and they don't feel whole. They don't have any purpose, and they get to this place where the only outcome is taking somebody's life and their own. And that's a scary place to be. So with Kevin, his aim was really to help build these men so they don't get to that level of extreme, but just so they have better options for themselves. Because these are the guys who done busted their butt. They done went and got these crazy degrees. They done got these good jobs. They're in these atmospheres where they're one of few, like Aaron talks about all the time. And then they're trying to figure out, okay, where's the women for them? And then they want the Instagram model. They want the woman who's not checking for them at all. So they need to get their minds together. And I think a lot of men find ourselves in this situation. And this is where that whole concept of high value men came from, was looking at these guys who were in these like high positions who just didn't have no game or no style, and they needed some help. So, you know, for me, like I said, the school of thought was what really made the impact to me, because the reason why I found Ibmore and I found that space, because I was in a bad space with my wife at the time. Like, I was questioning my marriage. I'm like, I don't know what we doing. We had just ended up having our second child. We had moved to a new place, and I'm just lost in the sauce, man. I'm not happy. This is when I was questioning therapy, and I ended up leaving doing clinical therapy to do something else because I was not feeling. I was probably depressed, if I'll be completely transparent. And I found this community, that said, you know what, the best thing for me to do is to become a man and stop being a simp, stop being down in the dumps, find some purpose in my masculinity, and push forward. And when I did that, everything in my life changed. My wife responded to me differently. You know, my kids responded to me differently. I got a lot more confidence in my job. Like, stuff just changed. And most people would not see or know that because I was trying to transform everything around me when really it was just transforming the inside of myself, which is what Ibmore was all about. So Kevin plays an important role, I think, in so many people's lives. Some people he plays way too much of an important role to, which we'll talk about in a moment. But for sure, he is an important figure, or he was. And his death is just going to immortalize him and his message and what he's about. And I hope that the men and the women who followed him can take pieces of what he gave and use it for a constructive impact instead of destroying one another, which is what we've seen so far since he's been gone. So I'll pause there. Any thoughts?
Yeah. I think I want to talk about some of the messages that were always very controversial. And one of the ones was obviously, and we all know what's your age, how much you weigh, do you have any children, etc. But the contrast that nobody ever saw, because this was, and I've talked to Brandon, I think you and I talked about this on other episodes. One of the issues that I even had with his content later on was that he also did figure out the algorithm. And the algorithm showed that being possible, I don't want to say overly critical, but this is getting me clicks, and we're human beings. So I'm not even he's not here to defend himself, but we are human. We are here in this existence. Before, his channel was okay. All of a sudden, if you look up, you have 1.5 million followers. You are gonna, at some point, nobody knows the length of time, but you're gonna continue to put out continue to put out the content that is bringing people to the channel. I don't care who you are. Some of y'all might have some moral objective. I don't believe it. But Kevin started putting out that content. And one of the things that I always found interesting was that when he would talk about how many children do you have, and that women would say, okay, I'm single. But no one ever went back, and Brandon knows this, and heard the episodes to where Kevin would specifically say to men, and I quote, "You are young. Your job is to get to 35 with no children." Now, I want women to think about that message. Think about what he's saying to you, and think about what he's saying to the men. There's a dichotomy there that we need to understand. He was trying to instill a level of discipline in men, but that message started to get overwhelming because people did not go back. And like I said, I don't know why he didn't go back to that content. And I think he did have conversations saying that he was going to try to start going back to more male content. The problem is that when you're not here to do it, it just didn't happen. But that was one of the things that I really found was Brandon knows, he's getting on there saying, no kids, no kids, no kids. Y'all got to be on purpose, discipline, discipline, discipline. And I think people got lost in hearing the woman message, but also he's talking to the guys because he's like, the ladies, the kind of guys you're looking for, I'm kind of trying to mold them a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to mold these guys a little bit. And I want both of you guys to have a level of healing. He always talked to men about trauma. He's like, have you talked to a therapist yourself? I want Brandon and Kyle, I want you guys both to talk about this, but I never got he always used to ask the woman, is your father in your life? And they would say, yeah. And then he would say, what does your father have to say about your relationship decisions? And for some reason, Brandon, I don't know, Brandon. I don't know, Brandon.
Welcome to the dynamic.
Kai, I don't know. But it got real quiet. It got real quiet, and that would speak volumes to me. Like, that spoke volumes to me, because what Kevin was almost to me saying, I don't want Kai to go, but what Kevin almost to me was saying, he was almost asking that question like, yo, you shouldn't even be calling me. We shouldn't be. I'm trying to show you that this thing is so broken. You're call, but I know he could, you know what I'm saying? But he's like, this shouldn't even be happening. If he's there, he should be the guiding force, or at least an influence to help you have a level of discernment to make decisions. But even that would get rejected, as if something was wrong with the dad's even decision making. And so those were just different things that I just found very interesting with the content. Go ahead, Kai.
Yeah, when you said that, made me think of one of his episodes in which he had, of course, hosted women on the screen, and one lady was on there, and she was basically thanking him, and she said, I started watching your content, and it made me realize how I needed to start appreciating my husband. And she said, I was on the verge of divorcing him. And, I was listening to my friends and some of my family, and they were telling me, like, girl, just leave him. You can do better. And she said, but I listened to your content and I want to thank you because I realize that I have a good man. And she went on to just talk about how fortunate she was to be married to this guy. So Kevin said, he's like, that's great. He said, so did you tell your husband that? And she said, what? He said, all this stuff that you're telling me about how great your husband is, how you're so happy you're with him. Did you tell him that? And she said, no, she's crying, right? So she's crying. She said, no, I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him. He said, you need to get off of here with me and you need to go tell your husband this. And she said, well, he's at work. He said, I don't care. Either call him now or be up when he gets home because he needs to hear this. And he said, that's the problem. Too many Black men do not hear how they are appreciated. And he said, and you got on here to tell me how great your husband is when you haven't even told him. He said, I want you to hang up right now and go call your husband. I mean, if that's not someone, and along with other things that he has said, that is about trying to find a way to get Black families to work, he's not up there saying, yeah, tell me how great I am. Tell me how I'm helping to improve your. He's like, no, you need to have this conversation with your husband. He needs to know how much you appreciate him, not me. I don't need to know that. And I just thought that dialogue with that woman, I think that spoke to what his mission was.
Right. Yeah. Trying to get people to get together. Go ahead, Aaron.
No, but the other argument that the other, I'm just going to call it pure stupidity, was when people said, well, Kevin had 2 failed marriages. Y'all, I'm not that smart. Y'all got to help me. I'm not that smart. I think Steve Harvey sold 7 million books. And I don't see anybody telling Uncle Steve that he doesn't know what he's talking about when he bought those books. And it bothers me because it's like, are we that immature to not understand that people fail at stuff daily? And some of those experiences that Kevin actually had in the marriages, whether they worked or not, he probably found out some stuff about himself, about his spouse, about his family. He talked about church a lot. Now, he talked about church a lot if you watch his content and the negative implications that going to certain churches had, leadership, all these different things. And I'm just like, why, are we that immature to where we really are looking at somebody's decisions they made and they can't learn from that and kind of spread it to, like, is that where we are, Brandon? I mean, you're the mental health expert, so I really need, because that feels like that's where we are. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying that because it feels like a lot of people, Brandon, a lot are thinking that way. Am I wrong about this?
No, that's a defense mechanism. And looking for that level of credential to prove yourself is right is what happened when people receive truth that they do not want to digest. They do not want to accept it. Black women do this all the time. Well, what school did you go to? And how many degrees do you got? And how long have you practiced? And how many marriages and how many kids you have? Like, that is just a defense mechanism of, you can't tell me nothing. Why are you talking? Because there's a level of disrespect there, because it's not respect. There's no respect there for Black men and Black men being able to tell Black women anything. This is just where we've gotten in society, where Black women do not respect the viewpoints of Black men unless they are catering to Black female narratives that make them feel good, even if it's not the truth. Like, we could tell Black women beautiful lies and they'll believe it and soak it up. And that's why Steve Harvey, you brought up Steve Harvey, that's why he can sell 7 million books, because he told Black women, don't give it up for 90 days. Like, that was the biggest thing from that last book that he wrote, Think Like a Man, right? Don't give it up for 90 days. Well, sorry, Black women, but in this society, you ain't giving it up for 90 days. If we done have some consistent dates, you're going to be lonely. I'm sorry. And guess what? That was like 10. I remember when that book came out, my wife was reading that book when we got back together. So I'm just going to get super personal on this episode. So my wife was reading. So I met my wife in 2004 when we both started college. I met her first day of school. We kind of talked. I had a girlfriend. Long story short, I chose my other girlfriend over my wife. My wife hated me, didn't talk to me for years. Fast forward to 2010, I run into her randomly at the club downtown. She's lit. I'm not lit yet. She's all over me. This was like the one that got away. Bang, boom, we got back together. At the time when we get back together, my wife's reading Steve Harvey's book. She's telling me all this 90-day crap. I'm like, look, you can wait 90 days, but I got these other chicks warming up the bench. So if you cool with that, then that's what it is. And she wasn't cool with that. Now let me just be quite frank. The 90-day thing didn't work. Like I don't know what day we was on, but it wasn't 90. But I'll tell you this: if she would have kept going down that road, we would not be together. Because I was in my prime. I'm like 24 years old. I'm a professional black man. I was in really good shape back then too. I had just bought a brand new Lincoln MKZ. I'm flossing, dude. I'm living my best life. 90 days, bro. From what I was going to, what I left to try to get with her, she's talking about 9 days. That was bad advice that a lot of black women were taking. Now, I'm not saying that women should just be giving it up all willy-nilly. You should definitely be protecting yourself. But it should be some kind of cooperation. It shouldn't just be like, this is my 90-day rule because Steve Harvey said it. Well, Steve Harvey ain't giving you no other context besides stuff like that. And that's what gets lost in a lot of this. And we can even fast forward to today where women ain't waiting 90 days. The body counts that the modern young black woman has today does a 90-day rule doesn't. That's some old Steve Harvey, old school generation X stuff. Like that's not even in existence anymore. So nowadays, just like it's always been, a guy needs to have game and a woman has to be able to deter, who's a quality guy for her to, connect with sexually or not. And at this point in time, the women have a lot more leverage when it comes to, sex, and men don't. And this is why you're seeing so many men who gravitate towards someone like Kevin because they're trying to figure it out. And you see a lot of women who gravitate towards Kevin because they need that validation from males. And Kevin was a strong male from an online perspective who was willing to engage with them, go back and forth. I've seen so many black women create Instagram pages and YouTube channels talking about, I went up against Kevin Samuels. I tried to conquer Kevin. Like Kevin Samuels was an ecosystem. And these women I follow some of these chicks. They was fun. I was like, let me see what she's talking about. Because they were literally saying, I went up against Kevin. Here's my experience against Kevin Samuels. So there was women who intentionally went on there to try to defeat him. Like he was like the final boss on some video game or something. But that was the approach, because in their minds, he's a man that needs to be destroyed. And when he died, that's how a lot of these women responded. Steve Harvey's not a man to be destroyed because he feeds into their narrative. In today's society, if you do not feed into the black female narrative, you are the enemy, and they will treat you as such until you move on or until you just completely shut up. And we've seen this time and time again with every black man who does not accept that narrative. I'm gonna pause there and let one of you hop in.
Kai, I got a question. Kai, I got a question because Brandon brought it up. You have said that Kevin has influenced you in some way, shape, or thought. One of the consistent criticisms I heard from women was, if you like something Kevin is saying, you are called a pick-me.
Mm-hmm. I have heard that, yes.
You've heard that, Kai? I just want to make sure you've heard that term. Okay, Kai. So 2 questions. Number 1, are you a pick-me, Kai? And then number 2, why is that term problematic when all Kevin was really talking about, in my opinion, was cooperation?
Right. So I'm not a pick-me. So I'm a woman who understands her role in the community and relationship. And I think a lot of us, we don't understand what our role is. Or then when we're told what the role is in community and relationship, it's rejected because it doesn't feel, that's not what I feel like doing. No one can tell me what to do. And you can't, that's not how community works. And I remember, Aaron, in the last episode, you said, do we have community? Is that something that we have as Black folks? When we say the Black community, does that even exist? And it can't exist if no one is listening to each other. If women are saying, essentially right now, from what I'm seeing, Black women are the Black community. And Black men have removed, I don't know where the kids are, but anytime I see anything about
they belong to the women.
It's
Yes.
all women. How is that a community?
It's exactly what's happening.
And it's concerning because as we talked about where we are economically and how that's not even important to us. So that's not even of concern, that the conversation, okay, we need to really come together because look where we are economically. Look where we are when we compare ourselves to our white counterparts. Should we now be more serious about taking up our roles and responsibilities as adults? No, we're still not serious about it. We're looking at inflation rates. We're looking at food not being on the shelves like we're used to seeing. I saw that there's like a shortage of baby formula. Is now the time to come together? No, we're still separate and having these arguments. Many Black women are still saying, I can do this by myself. I don't need a man, especially a Black man. And what's interesting to me is I was doing research for a presentation, and I was looking up information regarding being a single parent and the health outcomes of that. And when you look at the health outcomes, people that are, because of the stress of being a single parent, you have higher rates of chronic conditions. Purely because of the stress, number one, and then also because you have typically have less income coming into the household. So that means that the food selections that you have probably are not going to be healthy as well. So here we are promoting single parents in our community, and there's scientific data that shows that this is not healthy. It's not mentally healthy. It's not physically healthy at all, but we're promoting this. And so when you were talking about, I know it feels like I'm jumping, but when you were talking about data, statistics, and looking back at the research of what Kevin was providing on his YouTube channel, that's the thing. We're not looking at data. We're not looking at statistics. We're purely looking at what makes us feel good. And that is to our detriment, because what we're looking right now is seeing a huge shift in society, and it has nothing to do about emotions. It's about power. While we're stuck in our emotions, we're seeing power moves, and that's not how a community or group of people can survive. So if Black women want to say, I don't need Black men, we are the Black community, we're separate from the Black community, let's see how long that lasts in this new America.
I mean, Brandon, what is this? What? Oh Lord!
So Kai jogged my memory. We talked about we're promoting.
I remember this
single mother. This was just literally like 3 months ago, where Van Jones is promoting this conscious co-parenting stuff. Right? This is Van Jones. This guy's a multi-millionaire. I think he received $30 million from Bezos about a year ago or something like that. I think it might have even been more than like 50 mil, right? And he ends up getting a baby mama. Go ahead, Kai.
I'm sorry. You triggered me, Brandon.
I should have. You should be triggered by this.
I cannot take this man seriously.
Look at this picture.
He's always crying on CNN about, I don't know, voting, the sky is blue. I can't, I don't take him seriously at all. He is a detriment to the Black community.
Tell him how you really feel, Kai. Tell him how you really feel, Kai.
I mean, a detriment in so many ways. So a couple things, right? This is placating. This is what I was talking about earlier. Placating to the Black female narrative, right? So this is a high level version of Van Jones, a 53-year-old Black man. All right, he's already had children. He's already been married. He's had biracial children before. I think he has 2 from his actual marriage. Mm-hmm. He ends up getting this woman pregnant. I think she might be mixed race herself. And to validate this single parentness, he calls it conscious co-parenting as something that we should champion. Who is buying into the consciously co-parenting thing other than Black women who are already single parents themselves, who watch CNN where Van Jones is on, who's been placating to the Black community for so long. Not just the Black community, Black voters for the Democratic Party, who are overwhelmingly who? Black women. But we don't see the game being played here. We don't pay attention to none of this. We just see Van Jones get some woman pregnant, throw a fancy name, consciously co-parent, sound like Dr. Umar Johnson, and now he's supposed to be cool. This again, this is insulting to Black people. We don't call this stuff out. Just like when Joe Biden says, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black, that is an insult. And we don't even register it in our minds because we are just so used to trying to feel good from people who don't care about us on a collective level. It's sad. It's sick and sad. And we do this all the time. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's right. And I think that the other thing is that oh man. But I think the other thing, and we've talked about it already on previous broadcasts, but when Kevin would talk about the numbers, and to me, that was a very teachable moment, because when he starts asking people what's the cost of living, to live in Houston, to live in Texas, to live in Atlanta, now all of a sudden you are literally making people think. And as Kai said, people don't want to think. Women didn't want to be up there and think. Some of those answers, and I was even surprised. I'm like, y'all, this is not serious, is it? But a lot of people were really, really thinking like, okay, this is not real. And so Kevin is like, okay. And we all know with inflation, so you want to stay home and live in Atlanta and live in Buckhead and drive a G5, and he drives a Range Rover, and he has to make $479,943 per year. And this is the top 1% of earners in the country. And everybody's got the same dream. Because I never heard anybody else say that they had a different dream. That's the problem. Of the people that were calling in, the percentage of women that would say, I'm willing to work with somebody that's average too. And that's another thing. We got to get right to that, though. We got to get right to that. We got to get to it. I know, Kyle, we might as well just go there now. Most people, if we do it numerically, are average. When did average become an insult? Michael Jordan and LeBron James are not you. They have an exceptional talent. They were able to pick up a little orange ball and put it in a hoop, and they use that leverage to go do something. The other people in the community we're everyday working folks. And I want Kai to get right to this. When did average not only become bad? I was talking to my lady today, and sometimes she can go feminist. Sometimes she'll be Black power. Sometimes she's in the middle. We were having this conversation. Shout out to you. She says to me, Aaron, we're listening to all this content. She said, but, I'm living in this neighborhood. And I would say to myself, I'm listening to Kevin, and sometimes I don't even want to say he's right, but I'm looking at all these white guys. She said, I'm looking at this lady. I'm talking to these, these older like white women. She's like, oh, I have 5 kids, and, my husband makes like $95,000 and I stay home. And I'm like, according to Kevin, that's not a high value man. How are they managing that household? She didn't have a dream. She didn't have a fantasy, but this guy earned this income. She's talking to all these different peoples of all these different backgrounds, Kai, and they're making it work. There's no fantasy about getting with the next Kobe Bryant. People, and we talked about this, are coming together and trying to establish relationships with each other. When did average when did that become a bad thing? We're average on our jobs. If you own a company, you have average people working for them. So now you're insulting them? Mm-hmm. This is stupidity.
Yeah, that whole average thing, I don't know why that is such a rub for a lot of Black women. And I think that goes along with the whole thing of like, I'm not settling. And some of the dialogue when Kevin Samuels would bring the women on and they're like, no, I'm not settling. He's asking them, like one lady was like not unemployed, had several kids. The kid's father was not in their life and she was living at home with her mom. And she said, I'm not settling. And I'm like, what do you do? Like, So what are you bringing to the table that, like, I don't know. I don't know where this whole thing about not settling has come from. Like you said, the average, like there were women that would come on and say, well, I'm not settling for like an average guy. And it's just like, I don't know, this inflated sense of who you are. And it's just, I think that Kevin forced women to look in the mirror and say, no, you are average. And so therefore you should get an average guy, because that's what you are. But I think we live in especially in our community, everything is like queen, and you're a queen, and you're a goddess, and you're on this. I know I'm about to get in trouble. Brandon looked at me like I'm about to get in trouble. And it's just like, I know you listen. I feel I'm getting on my soapbox. When we look at queens, right? And you can argue and say if they had a king or not even going there, but that means that she was able to rule over her kingdom, right? Or a kingdom. That means that hopefully if she was successful, that she just didn't operate out of a space of emotionalism, but she wanted to do what was best for the kingdom to survive. So that was her purpose. How do I make sure we survive? If we're going through a rough period of time, how do I make sure that we have enough food for my people? That means sometimes she had to make sacrifice. Sometimes she had to make decisions that maybe other people didn't like. That also meant she listened to her advisors. It wasn't a person that just showed up because their woman said, I'm a queen. No, it means that you knew how to run a kingdom. And if you were a king, if you were a queen and had the king, that means he could entrust you to run and carry out orders while he's away, maybe fighting at battle. Mm. So that's two people that are working together to move forward their purpose, their agenda for their nation. That's not what's happening in our community. We just have a lot of people running around saying they're queen and goddess, but they're not pouring anything into our community to advance us forward. And that's concerning, because that's all emotion. It's like, I don't have to do anything. I can just say I'm a queen. I don't have to bring anything to the table. I don't have to do anything for my community. I can just kind of say that I'm a queen, and that's it. And no one can't say that I'm not, because if you say that I'm not, then you're a pick-me.
Mm. But Brandon, if I get with a girl and she makes $35,000 a year, am I settling for an average woman?
No, our standards are different. A high-value man will get a chick at Chick-fil-A.
Oh, right.
With no thought, if she bad, it don't matter.
Right. But that's the stupidity. Do men ever settle? That was Kevin's point. It's like, are we settling?
I think some men can settle. Mm-hmm. I think you make compromises based on what you need, but I think women should do the same thing. The difference is the type of settling that a woman does is more for security, where a man is settling for usually legacy or a purpose. So I want to have children, I want to have companionship, or I want to make sure that I'm sowing my oats in this place. So I'm going to find someone here versus being with this person over there.
Right.
Where a woman is settling for security. It's like, I need these things. But see, this is the answer to Kai's question. This is where the trick bag has happened. Black women have been the most supportive victims of all. Just like they always say, Black women always say we're the most victimized people in America. You got some good ass lives, because you ain't got to worry about where your food's coming from. You ain't got to worry about shelter. You need to worry about protecting yourself, because we got so many damn bullets flying in our communities. It's insane. But typically, you haven't had to worry too much about that. Domestic violence is out of control. But outside of that, when it comes to your bare basic needs, if you scratch out the violent piece, Black women have been taken care of since the 60s from our government. And I know when people bring this up, they always get into the welfare queen thing, and they kicked out the men. But that was the welfare state being introduced to African-American folks was a very pivotal moment for family dynamics. Our women were already primed to saying these niggas ain't shit. And what that did was give them enough backing to move forward on that thought process. Black men have been screwing up for a long time. let's just be honest. Black men have gone off to war and have had babies and decided not to come back and stay in Europe and all types of crazy stuff. Black men, once the jobs went to the east and the north, they left the south. They hopped on trains and buses and said, to hell with my family. We're going to have the Johnsons in Cincinnati and the Johnsons back in Arkansas.
Yep.
Black men have been screwing up for a long time. And when Black women had the opportunity to say, F this, we're going to get our own with feminism and the welfare state, that's what started what we have today. We just have a very much more trumped up version because now Black women can get a Nissan Altima, a damn associate's degree, a job that's going to pay them about $40,000. If they have a kid, they can get child support and government assistance. And she can do a side hustle on the side to make a little bit of extra money, go on vacation with her friends, get a cute ass dog, get a bomb ass outfit, get validation on Instagram. She's getting all her needs, and then get some on the side from any dude she wants. And all that's validating her. But at the end of the day, she's not getting companionship. She ends up not being happy long term. She ends up being even more bitter. And if you look at a lot of times, the dynamics with the kids as they get older starts to deteriorate as well. And we have this ongoing cycle over and over and over again. I hate to be so just straight to the point with it, but that's what we see so often in our community. And then you see these same women call Kevin saying, I deserve a man who's making $350,000 a year. Bruh, that ain't gonna happen with these circumstances that are going on. But I rest my case. Final comments, because we know we gotta wrap up here pretty soon. Any final thoughts on Kevin or where we need to go as Black people? I think this may be part one of a bigger conversation as we go. Any final thoughts from the two of you?
I want to say Kevin did one episode about mothers and daughters and that relationship. And I think as women that are my age and older, I think it is our responsibility to pour into these young. Some of them are not going to listen, right? Some of them are not going to pay attention to what we have to say. But I think that it is our responsibility to share with them, give them the wisdom of what it means to come into womanhood, what it means as far as roles in a relationship, in a marriage. And I always remember this one thing that Kevin says to the women that call into the show. He says, did your mom show you how to be a wife? And many of them say, well, I saw my mom was a wife, or their mom was, but there was never, I don't remember hearing a woman saying, yes, my mom showed me how to be a wife, and this is how she showed me. This is what she taught me. And so we can't expect women to be wives if no one is showing them how to be that. And so this is my call to action for Black women, for those of us who have done the work and who can show up and show young girls that there's another way. It's not just what we're seeing on television, but there's another way. And this is how you build family. This is how you build community. It's time for us to begin to have those tough conversations and be honest with ourselves and Black women that are coming up. That this is what we need to do. And this is about survival. This is not just about, oh, let me have my family, let me have my house. This is actually about survival. So I think kind of my takeaway from Kevin is kind of what role will I play in carrying on that message to make sure that Black women understand their importance in us coming together and actually creating a Black community.
Yeah, I think behind all the criticisms, the glad he's dead, all this nonsense, and as ugly as it's gotten, I think Kevin, and I heard Dr. T. Hassan Johnson was talking about it. He created conversations that men were already having, but he just magnified it.
Right.
And that it also, unfortunately, with his demise, it showed how out of whack our relationships are. And that's the part that disappoints me the most, is that people are not being objective and saying, wait a minute, none of this looks good.
Right.
None of it. None of this. The guys, the girls, and Kevin in his own way was trying to figure out, okay, how do we even get this back in balance? And that doesn't mean you had to agree with them, but he did highlight a very, very ugly portion of Black male and female relationships today, and that they are totally non-constructive. And that is something that we definitely just have to address and be honest about. And then, maybe we can try to make some constructive changes and start partnering, as we always talk about, and getting into some healthy relationships.
Agreed. Yeah, we got a lot of work to do when it comes to relationships. And Gavin just highlighted it. As somebody who has daughters, I think about it every day. Like, the probability of my daughters getting with a black man who's like stable, very low. Very low. Whether I teach them how to, or whether my wife teaches them how to be wives or not, like the chances are slim to none that they're most likely going to be in interracial relationships at the speed that we're going, at the age that they're at how society's formulating. And if I want them to be with strong black men, where do I put them in position to start seeing those young black men now? And that's a very hard thing to even accept. So a lot more to talk about, a lot more to dive into. We will do so on the other episodes of the third. We're going to wrap up for today. We appreciate all of you joining us. Please be sure to share this episode and comment. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you didn't like. Make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. We'll be back soon. Until then, take care. Peace.